Jake Renfro might be the most important guy in this team. We're going to tell you why. Locked On Badgers, let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. Over there is our good friend, Rajiv, from, obviously, you guys know where he's from, the Bucky Report, and also hanging out here a lot. Go check out what they're doing, as always, him and Justin. We got a good show today. Underrated storylines. I think, we both, and I think the Badger community as a whole, spend a lot of time talking about a lot of the obvious storylines, which we're going to keep talking about because they keep evolving. But what are some underrated storylines, position by position, that could sink this ship or maybe propel it forward a little bit? Today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Rajiv, we're going position by position, underrated storyline at each spot. Plus, we got some comments from the Discord we're going to throw in here. We'll just take turns back and forth starting it. I'll start at quarterback. I think the underrated storyline is Hunter Simmons. I really do. And there's a couple ways you could go with this, but I know for a fact, because I do this show every day, he was not exactly a talking point when he signed from Southern Illinois. It was kind of just assumed Carter Smith is probably the 3, Danny's the 2, you know who the 1 is. And then he brought in this guy who's going to be a camp. I think he was kind of framed as, it's kind of a camp arm. You need another arm. He's played football. He's pretty solidly kind of moved up that depth chart. He's a 3. He got some reps with the 2s in a practice I saw. He's got pretty good size. He actually had some moments at Southern Illinois. He's played a lot of ball. Not going to overblow it. I'm just telling you, the coaches like him, and he's looked better than I expected.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wrote down too. I have a sort of a backup one, just in case you had the same one. But yeah, I mean, I think that this team is being protective. The coaches are protecting the fact that we've lost our starting quarterback the last 2 seasons, which we've had Braden Locke back there with no one really behind him. And I feel like at this point, they're setting themselves up just in case there's an injury to Billy. You've got Danny O'Neal and you've got Hunter Simmons, 3 guys with experience, 3 guys that can walk out on the field and not look like a deer in the headlights. It's super important. The one for me, which, I wrote down Hunter Simmons, but I did an interview today with the Maryland guys, with some bunch of people that do a Maryland podcast for our Know Your Foe series on the Bucky Report. That episode will drop on Wednesday this week. And they said to me, Billy Edwards was not the problem, clear as day. But they also said that he still made some really, really bad mental mistakes at times, bad decision-making at times. Now, horrible offensive line, bad situation. What if Billy Edwards just turns the ball over a lot? Because Maryland's schedule last year, not that strong. Maryland's schedule this year, literally a walk in the park cupcake. Our schedule, we've obviously talked about a lot. We're sort of assuming that Billy Edwards is going to be this vast upgrade to Braden Locke, which he will be, but also he might not be. And I'm really getting concerned that he could just have a few turnovers early on, and all of a sudden are people calling for Danny O'Neal because we've got the best backup we've had in 3 years? Or is it really going to just be this is your team?
That's a good one. So I've actually kind of made this point a little bit. I don't actually think it's necessarily a vast upgrade for Billy. I think the narrative has maybe gone there. I don't necessarily think it is. A point I've made, and I said this on a show with Tyler Van Dyke last year. Quarterbacks who are still in college as a senior are in college for a reason. There's something in the game that hasn't translated to the NFL. And I think for Billy, some of that is decision-making, and that's not 100% on Maryland, to your point. I think it's a good one. I agree completely with that. And I do think he's going to be solid, but that's kind of the word I've used with Billy, is solid. And I do think at times that narrative for what Badger fans might be expecting has exceeded where I think it might realistically be. I think it's a really good one. Let's go running back. I'll let you lead this one off. Underrated storyline, running back.
Yeah, so I feel like Darian Dupree is kind of the forgotten man. Look, we talk so much about Dylan Jones this offseason, and we obviously talk about Yakimelli, deservedly so. He deserves our time and attention. He looks like a monster on everything pictures I've seen from camp and stuff like that. Darian Dupree had 80 carries last year, and I feel like people just they talk about him, but he could be the best running back on this team. And that's not going to surprise anybody if that happens. He could be the most dynamic. He could be, whether it's receiving out of the backfield or different kinds of plays into Grimes' offense, but no one's really talking about him. And I just want to give him a little love. It's just he could really have a great year. And it's almost as if just because Dylan Jones is now the new Badger running back, that all of a sudden it's Darian Dupree. He's such a weapon for us, and he had 80 carries last year, and I feel like he's kind of the forgotten man.
So I like that. It actually factors into mine a little bit. And by the way, our rated storylines are kind of a mix of good, bad, in the middle. Yeah. It's not all positive, not all negative. I actually am taking yours and winding up into a bigger point where I think the underrated storyline is our running back room might be elite. I really think, because we've been beaten down collectively as Badger fans for a couple of years, and it's just kind of like blood. And we thought Tyree was going to be maybe better, and Ches was going to be better. And we had a period of running back recruits that didn't work out, and we've had injuries, and the offense hasn't been good. And we somehow lived through the Phil Longo experience without giving ourselves liver poisoning. And I actually think both of these were 4-star running backs. Darian played as a true freshman in the Big Ten. That's how talented he was. Dylan Jones was wanted by a bunch of SEC schools. He looks terrific. We know that Cade Yakimelli is a 3. Like, what are we talking about here? I actually think this running back room could be upper tier in the Big Ten, and people nationally haven't caught on yet. That's my underrated storyline there.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, and I hope that we get to really deal. We get to see what they can really do, and that kind of might lead us into our next position, because those guys up front have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, well, so we'll go receiver next.
Yeah, okay.
But we are definitely getting into offensive line. So we'll go receiver, tight end, offensive line. It's just the random way I wrote them down. For me, their underrated storyline at receiver is, can we win against athletic, physical secondaries? And I remember specifically, you and I both like Vinny a lot. We're Vinny guys. Penn State gave him some issues physically. Penn State came up. Penn State recognized the threat. They said, this guy's been really good. We're going to focus on him. They came up, played press man coverage, and they took him out of a lot of that game. And then I'm watching practice, and our secondary looks pretty good. And inversely, conversely, if our secondary looks pretty good, they're playing physical, our receivers weren't generating quite as much separation in the live drills as I thought maybe they should. And it felt like Agard was kind of being physical with Ballard, maybe throwing him off some routes. I'm not sure if Tretch is a great route runner yet. He might just be kind of a guy you get the ball in space and let him try to do things. I don't know. It's possible we're maybe a little high on our receivers, and I'm not sure about a physical secondary matching up with them.
I'm going to have to use my backup one again, because I also wrote down number 1, separation. Can we actually get separation? We talk about speed with Ballard. We talk about speed with Vinny. We talk about speed with Crowdis and Kekahuna. They're all fast, but are they fast enough to actually get separation and actually give Billy Edwards a target to hit? And that is something that I don't think is talked about enough. But my other one is Eugene Hilton. And I feel like, are we underselling his pedigree a little bit? And look, I'm not saying obviously I've been high on Hilton the whole time, but every time I hear anything that comes out of like the freshman wide receivers, Hilton looks good. Hilton looks like he's developing well. Hilton looks like he could be elite, all these things eventually. His dad was an NFL star for my Indianapolis Colts. He's been around the game his entire life. He knows what an excellent top-notch WR1 looks like in the league and in college and everything. And he's been honing these skills for a long time. I just feel like and we've seen this from other great receivers and their children, like Marvin Harrison. I just think that this guy could really be special. And so my connected storyline to that is, how much does he really play? We talk a lot about the other guys. Eugene Hilton could absolutely be a starter by the end of the season. He could absolutely do that. I almost think we're underselling his pedigree a little bit.
Well, doesn't that tie into, it's a good point and well spoken on your front. Doesn't that kind of tie into the point I made too? If our guys are struggling creating separation, maybe you turn to a guy like Hilton who has that pedigree, and that pedigree matters. I mean, let's be honest. There's a reason he's a receiver in this. Like, if his dad had been an electrician, he's probably not where he is now. It matters who your dad is. You inherit certain things and you learn certain things from being around the game. That matters. I think it's a really good point.
And getting separation and learning that skill of knowing how to use your body that's a learned skill. Some of it's innate, some of it's athletic ability. I get that. But some of that is really learned in his ability to do that. And I think he's got that. Literally the very first time I watched that guy's film, the first thing I think we all said was route running. He clearly has the ability to run really crisp routes and get separation. That's what his dad had to do. His dad wasn't the biggest guy in the NFL. His dad wasn't the fastest. He knew how to run routes well, and that makes a big difference.
That is extremely well said. We're going to pause here, friends of the show. We're going to go back. I'm going to kick it to Rajiv. We talking tight ends. Underrated storyline at the tight end position. I've got a really good one there as well. That's coming up next, Locked On Badgers. First, a quick second for our friends of the show, incredible friends of the show over at Monarch Money. And listen, Rajiv and I are both parents. You got to be a little more, you just got to grow up with your money as your family grows up around you, Rajiv. And Monarch Money is an incredible spot to just track everything you got going on. Because has there ever been a point in your life where you feel like you are, and I'm going to already tell you, the answer for me is no. A point in your life where you are 100% on track of every dime dollar that you have going everywhere?
No, not a chance. Not a chance.
I'm not even close to that, but I've gotten a lot better because I've used Monarch Money. Monarch Money is like a personal CFO. It brings everything together, visual tools, data, numbers. You can plan goals collaboratively with your significant other. You can do it all on Monarch Money. It is the fastest, easiest way to do it. It's secure, and every type of account that you have money in, whether it's an investment, which are great, or maybe some credit cards you're trying to pay off, you can put all those into Monarch Money, and it tracks all your hidden expenses, of which I have several, it turns out, that Monarch Money was able to kind of unearth. I'm not the... In my family, I'm more of the spender, and my wife is more of the saver.
Same in my family, by the way.
Monarch Money has helped close that gap a little bit. Right now, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first order. All right, let's jump back into this. Rajiv, tight ends, underrated storyline. Let's go.
Yeah. So for me, we've talked about a lot about Lance Mason recently and his, route running ability. Billy Edwards spoke about it at Big Ten Media Days. My underrated storyline is, do we have an all around good tight end, like can actually block and can be a receiving threat? And then along with that, are we going to see the emergence of someone that you and I both liked for a while, Grant Steck, 6'6", just a really good frame, kind of has the ability to do both things. And are we going to see someone that's not named Ashcraft or Mason, or even like, Seagreaves really become our best tight end this year? Because we have some weapons here and there. We have some good pieces, but do we really have a actual tight end one that we can rely on all the time? I don't know that we do. I hope that Mason kind of becomes that. So I'm kind of wondering if it's time to see some of the youth pop into that position.
That's an interesting one. I think Mason is our best chance at that. And I wouldn't have said that a couple weeks ago. He's a little bigger than I thought he would be. He's a little more physical than I thought he would be, and he catches the ball pretty well. I think he actually can be tight end, an all-around tight end for us this year. I really do. And I don't think it's an elite blocker. I don't, but I think it's an adequate blocker and a pretty good pass catcher. So that works. My underrated storyline is actually Tanner Koziol leaving is the best thing that could happen to us.
Wow.
And I know how high I was, super high on Tanner Koziol.
Oh, yeah.
We both were, right? We talked about it. When he left, I said, that's a loss. They got him for a reason. Turns out he might have just been really soft, and him quitting on the team early opened up a spot for a better tight end to come in. Listen, there's luck involved there, but I'm telling you, they love Lance Mason. And you watch him in practice, they're using him on jet sweeps to the tight end. They're using him on tight end screens, drags across the field. They are getting the ball in a ton of ways. Red zone, they're featuring him. They wouldn't be doing that if they didn't really like what they got there. I think Koziol leaving could actually be like the best thing that happened to us this offseason outside of getting like Mason Reiger.
Imagine 94 reception guy leaves, and we were both pretty upset about it. And then you're not feeling horrible about it. I don't feel quite the way that you do. I think that I'm really upset that he's gone, and I think it's a big deal still. And I think that we're going to miss that kind of production because he had elite production level. But you're right. If he is soft, if there's an issue there mentality wise, that can definitely be a good thing to get out.
Yeah, I mean, and who knows, right? But yeah, watch him go. Where did he end up? Where did he end up going?
Houston.
Houston. Watch, he catches like 130 this year, and I look like an idiot. But
ridiculous.
I think people are going to like Mason. I'll say that. Moving on to the next one. We're moving to offensive line. So we both have the same. We talked about it before. I think it's my turn to lead off. So we'll just put this one out there collectively. We talked before the show, backup center. And this is where we left the show. Renfro is so important to this team. And Renfro has a history of some injuries. He's missed a couple full seasons with injuries. We have lived through snapping issues, the Tanner Mordecai era with Borlini. Like we've seen it kind of almost derail an offense. And watching practice, they haven't been able to find a guy that's consistently been able to snap the ball in the second line. It's hard to, I'm not going to say it's hard to envision Renfro staying healthy the entire year. He was able to stay healthy last year, and that's obviously what we're hoping for. But certainly that's a guy with an injury history. I don't know how else to say it. And I don't feel good about anybody to come in and snap the ball behind him right now.
If you ask any Badger fan right now, the strongest unit on our team, they're going to tell you running back. Everybody is pretty much saying that. And everyone's talking about the production they could have, Grimes' system. None of it works if the offensive line is not doing their job. And the center is a critical piece of that. Yes, you can always say the left tackle, the most important part. I get that. But the center is probably number 2 on any line. And Renfro is a really good center. But if he gets hurt, like, is it Ryan Corey? Is it Colin Cubberley? Yes, Blazek talked this week about how both those guys are developing and they're looking good, but people that were that practice, there's certainly warts there. There's certainly issues there. And are either of them really lined up to really good backup centers? So let's assume, for the sake, like you said, Renfro goes down. Let's say it's week 3 against Alabama, something like that. He's going to miss 3 or 4 weeks. Like, you've got the beginning meat of that Big Ten schedule. And all of a sudden, are you having issues calling calls on the line? Are you having run blocking issues? Are you having pass pro issues? Are people stunting up the middle and beating your center? And like, it can derail all that we're building up in our heads about this offense. Like, someone like me who constantly is building up this greatness, like, all of that can come crashing down if Renfro gets hurt. And I'm not trying to throw shade at Cubberley and Ryan Corey. I think they're really good players. I think they can develop, but I mean, backup center is a really, really important position.
Yeah. And I think so Kerry Gidonko is getting reps there as well as backup center. He might be in the mix. Yeah. No. Like, the point that they're shifting things around, I think they wanted it to be Corey, if we're being honest. And there were just some issues snapping the ball, right? And it doesn't mean it still can't be Corey, and it doesn't mean that can't get better. But I think it also brings up the other point of where there's just a lack of depth on this offense line, and that's going to get better. These younger guys that are getting in the mix, Cubberley, Davenport was in there. We saw Cam Clark, Hardy Watts, Powell, like these younger pieces that are growing. But right now, it feels like a fragile group if people start to go down, and people go down in the regular season, right? You already lost Haywood. There's issues at backup center. Let's say Heinzen gets banged up, do you move Brunner out there? And then what do you do at guard? Like, I'm worried about our depth on offensive line.
Yeah, it's a major concern for us, and hopefully it's not an issue we got to really deal with.
Let's get to the next one. I think this is your turn to start off. Defense line. On this one, we're talking more interior defensive line.
Yeah. So for me, the underrated storyline is EJ Whitlow. Like, we talk so much about size. We talk about the ability to get all these players in the program. Okay, now you got 8 300-pounders. What kind of changes from a coaching perspective are we making to fix this? Because even guys that were big, like, even a guy like Brandon Lane, like, he's a big guy. Like, some of the way that we attacked and we sort of, like, our techniques, we were getting swallowed up constantly at times last year against really good offensive lines. We're going to face a litany of good offensive lines this year. So I'm really curious about what changes from a technique and tactical standpoint from EJ Whitlow, and can he really develop these guys like a Dylan Johnson or someone that really, like, has been there? Can he really develop from a coaching perspective? We constantly talk about size, but EJ Whitlow, who's done a good job so far, I think he's, from a recruiting perspective, he's been good. I need to see it from him on the coaching side.
That's a really good one. I really didn't think about that. And as per is usually the case when Rajiv comes on, he gives me something to think about that I hadn't thought of. Yeah, this is a big year for Whitlow, a big year for Tressel, big year for those defensive coaches. That's a really good one. I went with Jamel Howard, who I think has, again, I say this all the time. I think this happened with Ashcraft. I think it's happened with other players. The portal era we live in speeds up our expectations for players. And we had already, and I say we, as collectively, a lot of Badger community had already kind of written off Jamel Howard, I feel like, to some degree. He's still young. Like, this is not a guy 7-8 years ago. People have been like, oh, is he going to leave the program? No, they'd be like, man, I can't wait in a year when he's waited his turn and he's ready to go. And this feels like a normal maturation process for a guy who has been in the program for a couple years now. He looks better this year. He's worked on his body. He's quicker. He's made plays. He's worked himself into the twos at times. And this is still the pedigree of a guy that we were pretty excited about. A guy that was a big recruiting win that Miami wanted, that has an athletic big body that can help you on the inside. I think he's going to play a little bit this year. And I'm excited to see what that could develop into in another year. So I'm going to go Jamel Howard here.
Yeah, what's interesting that you say that. We did a show at some point in the last couple months where I actually listed Jamel Howard as a recruit that I missed on. Yeah. I mean, he's a sophomore, junior. Like, come on. Like, yeah, you're totally right about this. I'm definitely guilty of that. I totally written him off, and he could still be a great zero tech for us at some point.
Yeah, or even a rotational guy, which
yeah.
But I'm the same way. Like, I think we all, because of the movement in college football, we're too quick to write players off. I'm guilty of that as well. And I think with Howard, he may still have some good run here. All right, we're going to take a quick sec. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the edge. And obviously, Mason Reiger is not on a raid storyline, but what else there might be? That's coming up next. Locked On Badgers. First, a quick second for our friends of the show. And as always, a quick second to say, thank you for everyone tuning into it, the community. Also, a big thank you to Rajiv for jumping on. I say this with a couple of people. I say this with Osin, certainly Justin when he's on here. Rajiv is also a better person than a podcaster, and he's an incredible podcaster. So go support their work, support good people doing good things. We say that all the time with good people. And if I have someone on the show and I don't say that, it's probably because I hate them. So just read between the lines. Let's go edge. What's your underrated edge storyline here?
Yeah, I mean, I think this for me is like, I guess, sort of a forgotten man again. Aaron Witt. I think that, he's a guy that, like, obviously a lot of injury issues, was healthier last year. We saw him out there, but I feel like he could be, obviously we talk about Riger, which is rightfully so. We've talked about Cheeks and other guys. What if Witt takes a step and can be the kind of guy that we have talked about for years, like of Aaron Witt actually being able to be a game wrecker and a guy that can create penetration and some, disruption. I personally haven't said his name one time when I talk about the edge guys on this team. I don't think I've even mentioned it on Bucky Report or here. And I feel like I'm missing that. He absolutely could be a guy that is finally ready to really take his spot on that position. Now it's a loaded room, but Aaron Witt, for me, forgotten guy.
Yeah, easy guy to root for too. Someone who's fought through a lot of injuries, kind of sums up what it means to be a Badger. I'm going to go Corey Walker only because he's been out. Walker was a big time guy coming over in the portal, a big addition, great size, 300-pounder, good length, was pretty productive at the D1 level. And then he's been dinged up or nicked up a little bit. And we talked a lot about Riger. We talked about DP kind of looking better. We talked about Cheeks. We talked about Fury. Fury looks good. And meanwhile, Corey Walker just got kind of worked back in. And I'm interested, man, because that was a 5.5 sack guy last year at the D1 level, again at the MAC level. But that's real production. And he's a 6'6", 297. It's a 300-pounder. I don't know how they're going to make all these bodies work, Rajiv. Maybe that's another storyline. But I'm interested in him.
I mean, can we talk about what the line looks like with Corey Walker on one end of it and Mason Riger on the other end of it, with like potentially, Perkins and Suggs in the middle? Like, wait, is this a proper defensive line all of a sudden?
I'm telling you, like, there were moments I was watching in practice, and I mentioned this on one of my shows, but they're almost doing hockey line shifts. Like Riger, DP, Suggs, and like Cheeks would run off, and coming in would be like Corey Walker, Suggs, Barton, and Tyrese Fury. I mean, they can rotate out across that front four 8 to 10 guys. And that alone is nice to see.
Yeah, that's a big storyline too. I mean, there's a lot of, we're going to have more pieces this year, and hopefully we actually see them all play. And we do have that rotation. We can keep the freshness, and they can pin their ears back and go for disruptive plays.
Yeah, it is nice to see. Inside linebacker, I'll go there. I'm a little tiny worried about Tackett Curtis. Like,
really,
there's a lot of excitement, and I think there should be. I'm not saying there shouldn't be. I didn't see a lot of plays from Tackett. And I do wonder, I brought this up, and I hope it's not confirmation bias, because maybe it is. Sometimes when you think something, you can almost kind of subconsciously look for it, right? I do think their skill sets overlap, him and Allegro, maybe a little too much, where they're both more north-south guys. I wonder if Tackett's a little stiff in space. And if you go back and, again, I'm just being honest, I'm a guy who really is excited for what he could be. And I'm absolutely, obviously, after 3 practices, not writing him off. But go back and look at practice reports from kind of anybody that's covered it. Have you seen anybody really talk about, wow, Tackett looks great out there, really making a lot of plays? This is one of the standouts. Allegro's looked really good. I think Tackett, maybe he's still feeling his way back, right? He has had a lot of injury issues. He doesn't look as athletic as kind of what that projection should look from that recruiting pedigree.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. You're right. Certainly, like, haven't really seen his name. The one I would argue back is that the person that did say his name was Luke Fickell at Big Ten Media Days. Brought him up. Obviously, what camp hadn't started yet. That's fair. Maybe there's a lingering injury that he's trying to nurse a little bit, so he hasn't been pushing as hard. Maybe he's a little almost like nervous that he's too healthy. Like, this is the healthiest he's been, and it's just kind of like, I'm going to save myself because I have an injury history. I'm going to save myself for the games a little bit. I'm not saying that's all good, but I guess I'm not worried about that, only because the coaches have like raved about him. And that's where hopefully that's not the case. For me, and I talked about Mason Post a lot. And I think a lot of people are kind of like, is he? I mean, he's probably not going to play because you've got a loaded room. You've got guys like Catalano, and you've got other people that are like pushing. But I still think that you said it one time to me a while ago. You said that like freshmen play when freshmen can do things that other guys can't do. And you said it about Jamel Howard. Didn't happen, but like that was one of those things. But I feel like Mason Posa kind of is that. Like he's a guy he has like this elite ceiling of speed and athleticism and tackling ability and violence that he plays with. And I just really wonder if we're underselling the opportunity for him to play this year. Like if we're going to see rotation and maybe Tackett Curtis has some issues or whatever, like I know there's people in there to play, but I think Mason Posa is that good of a player that we absolutely could see him in his freshman season.
I'll tell you this, he looked long and athletic, even a little bigger than I thought he would look, considering he's a wrestler, right? So wrestlers are sometimes a little, you have to manage your weight in certain ways. I think the future is super high in him. I think Coop might be ahead of him. I think if one of those freshman linebackers play, I talked about on a show today, when you think of inside linebacker, number 44, really instinctual at Wisconsin, think of Borland. Cooper is number 44. Coop is really instinctual. Coop, like I'm telling you, like they have some things in common there that I think Coop is going to force his way onto the field. And Post is great too. The other thing I said is you can absolutely dream on a future inside linebacker combo.
I was just going to say, what a combination right there.
Yes, dude. I think this year, and it partially might be because Coop got here earlier, right? Like Posta still finished up his wrestling career, had the summer off, not off, but I think Coop is interesting too there. Let's go down to cornerback. I think it's your turn here.
Yeah. So I think cornerback, we've talked a lot about Hallman. We talked a lot about Agard. And there's, everyone's bringing up the freshman. You brought him up on your show today, Kairos Gaines and Jameer Scott. I think someone on this team is really here to prove something, and I think it's Deani Hill. I feel like people aren't really giving him the opportunity to say that he could absolutely be one of those starters. I said a few weeks ago that I think he will be that starter. Now maybe it's Agard and I'm wrong, and that's fine. But he's a guy that sort of didn't play as much as he wanted at Miami, kind of left there not on the greatest terms. I think Miami fans will tell you, But sometimes when you have that motivation to say, you know what, I could make it there, but I'm going to come here and I'm going to really prove it. And I think that prove it factor that people have can be really, really impactful. Margins are so small in sports, right? Like everything that you do, like if you work this much harder, you can all of a sudden be that much better of a player. I'm not saying Hill is going to be great, but he's someone that I'm going to be watching for very early on because I feel like he's got something to prove. And I could see a situation where he's absolutely lining up as a starter opposite Ricardo Hallman. And I think a lot of people are just assuming that Agard is going to be that guy, and perhaps rightfully so with practice, stuff like that. But I think Hill might surprise people.
I'll tell you this with Hill, and this actually leads into my underrated storyline for the corners. It's a really physical group, and I don't think people are talking about it enough because Rico's not the biggest corner. Agard's not the biggest corner. People don't really know Deani Hill yet. People don't really know Gamir Latimer yet. Rico is a well-built 5'10", 5'11", and he will come up and he will support the run. Agard has gotten in Brady Collins' weight. I'm just telling you, like Agard, I need to do what Agard has done because I got to get a little stronger. Like that dude is bulked up, and he was coming up in run support and popping some people. Deani Hill had a huge hit on Dylan Jones in the flat. Like that's a really physical player. And then Gamir Latimer, Paul Haynes said it best. He's like a dog with big teeth. Like he had a hit on Tretch that forced an incompletion that Austin Brown picked off. That entire cornerback room, and then you imagine if you throw Nazir back in there, who's maybe the most physical of all of them, they're going to come up, they're going to hit, they're going to tackle. I do think there's some questions about maybe deep speed, some of that stuff, but I think it's a really physical cornerback room, and it's not talked about enough because some of those guys are a little smaller, and Deani Hill factors into that. He pops some people.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I really think he's going to surprise people, but we'll see.
Let's go safeties. For me, my underrated storyline, and I wouldn't have thought this up until maybe sometime in the summer when Austin Brown is generating a ton of buzz. I did say, listen, you're not going to be better at safety losing Hunter Wohler. I think now you can be a push at safety. I don't think it's a step back anymore. I think Austin Brown's going to step in super capably there. You and I both like Zachman, super solid. You've been high on him for a reason. And then Matthew Traynor, he comes in and he just hits. He's a freight train, for better and worse sometimes, but he's kind of a freight train. My underrated storyline is I don't think they necessarily take a step back despite losing Hunter Wohler because I think Austin Brown is primed.
You lose Hunter Wooler, and I think everyone, yeah, you're right. Because last year, that was what was one of his strengths. That was one of the elite sort of groups, right? And rightfully so with Zachman and Wooler. But I agree with you. And I think it's like it went to a strength again. It is absolutely right now. If you talk about strengths, I've mentioned running backs. You're also mentioning safeties in the similar breath. Like, yeah, that's one of the best units on the team right now because we've got Zachman and we've got Brown. The Brown is like, holy man, he's not just going to be like this nickel guy. Like he's actually going to be in his natural position of safety, and this is incredible. And you have Zachman, who's been around forever and played countless snaps. Yeah, I mean, this is my storyline is this might be the best unit on the team. This might be the best room. And there's young freshmen that look good, man. I'm telling Luke Emmerich and these guys like Dean, like they're going to be good players. And yeah, I think this really could be a great room and the best unit on the team.
Better unit, snap question, the edge group or safeties?
Safeties, because I feel like the edge group is just in total prove it mode for me for now. Like it's great that they look good as good as they do in practice, but that unit, like with the number of TFLs we had last year, you need to prove it. I'm not giving that unit any like real love until I see it on the field.
It is an entirely new unit. Those guys mostly weren't here last year, to be fair. But I hear
True,
you.
but that's also goes into my point about Whitlow and Mitchell. Like, we've got to see something from this group. Like we have yet to see Mike Tressel's defense produce any defensive disruption, any. So like, but we've seen really good safety play, and I think we're going to have that again.
I think it's fair. I think I'm a little entranced by Mason Reiger still. I'm under the spell a little bit, but no, I hear you. It is a good point. Let's go. We got two more. We got special teams and coaching. Then there's a couple. We're running a little long, but there were a couple really good ones in the Discord. I want to hit at least a couple of those.
Yeah, good long show's fine.
We'll do specials and coaching a little quicker, maybe. Specials. I think it's your turn to lead this one off. Special teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just the storyline is, do we have a kicker? Like, I really don't. I feel like, when we talk about like outlook on the season and we're going to be in a lot of tough games, well, like we're going to need our kicker. And man, we have there is like this sort of elephant in the room of we might not have a kicking game that's reliable. And all of a sudden we've got a 40-yard field goal to tie up the game late against Michigan. Like, are we making that kick? And I mean, if we're going to be better and if we're going to compete, we are going to be in close games. The only way we're going to beat half of our schedule is with a close game. I mean, I'm telling you, we're not going to blow any of those 6-7 teams out. So we have to beat them in a close game. And if you're going to have that, you've got to kick. And I'm really worried about it.
Yeah, dude. I can I tell you, because the point of the show is underrated storylines. I was like, because you're dead on. That is the storyline. But it's not really underrated, but that is it. Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. But I was searching for underrated storylines. I was like, is our long snapping game going to be good? Or is Atticus Bertram's as good of a runner as he showcased on that one play last year? And I'm like, there is no underrated storyline. It's literally just, can we kick the ball? Can we consistently be an average field goal unit where you, like to your point, you have confidence from 40 and in, and then occasionally you hit the 45 to 50 yarder. Like, you got to be able to do that, man, if you're going to be a good team. Stop kicking the ball to bounce. I would say this, it has been a minute since we've had a dangerous kick / punt returner. There are teams that have gashed us with that. We haven't been able to do that. And that's a big point. It's not about touchdowns. It's about field position. It's about stealing 10 to 15 yards consistently. It's about not allowing balls to roll 10 to 15 yards. It would be nice if we could get back to being better there, because for a long stretch, we had you had, I'm trying to think of the Alex Erickson, you had Jared Apperderis, even the shorter guy who returned a punt against Utah State. What was his name for a touchdown? I don't know. But my point is, we had a stretch there where we were pretty good at returns, and we haven't been for a while. So maybe that's my underrated storyline. Can we get back to having somebody back there that can consistently help in field position
and catch the ball on punts? That'd be good.
Like, it should. The bar should be. It's funny because people talk about all we want to do is catch the ball, and I'm not pushing back on you on this, but the bar with Wisconsin should be higher, right?
Yeah.
Like, catch the ball and get 10 yards consistently. Be an average return team, because that helps you with field position. Coaching. Here's my underrated storyline, and I'm super curious if you think I'm crazy on this one, because I might be crazy. This might be a silly, but I was really looking for an underrated storyline. Do you think in year one? So I'm watching Grimes, and you've heard it. Like, if you've seen the practice reports, you've seen what we've seen. It's really not that different from being there. I promise you. Like, Grimes is trying to do a ton. There is a ton of motion, movement. There is options going different directions. And I'm kind of wondering, there's been some procedural penalties, snapping penalties. The passing game hasn't really gotten completely unhinged. The defense is winning practices. This is a really tough schedule. Is it possible we're going to have more of a learning curve than we're anticipating, and that maybe we're trying to do a little too much, a little too soon?
Yeah, I don't think it's a little too much. We could have the learning curves could certainly be there, but I think that's part of camp. I think that's part of Grimes testing his players, testing his quarterback, figuring out who has the mentality and the mental fortitude to play his offense. And he's gonna find the cream rises to the top. And I feel like mentally there as well. And I think he's looking for that. It might not be that complex, even against Alabama or Michigan or whatever. Like he might dial it back, but he's kind of figuring out what limits he can really push and test because he's got it in his locker and they did it at Kansas. So I feel like it's, trial by fire. Like go in there and figure it out. Like struggle through it, make all the mistakes now. Like I kind of like that fact that he's pushing hard on the style of offense. I have no issue there.
Okay, no, it's fair. And I, like I said, I'm not going to judge too much off 3 practices either. Like there's going to be mistakes.
Yeah.
There's going to be back and forth. I'm not making too much of that. It was just a thought that popped into my head.
For me, it's Matt Mitchell. It's a guy that's been here for a while. It's someone that we've talked about before. I'm overhearing about like, okay, we don't have the players. Okay, you've got players now. You're 3 years in. You've got the players that you wanted to rush the passer, to create disruption. And Matt Mitchell, like you got to do it now because Mike Tressel's job's on the line with that. Luke Fickell's job could be on the line because of that. Like everything is about like, can we actually be a defense that does anything? Can our outside linebackers actually produce some of these like in plays that we had hoped that they would with this new style of 2-4-5 and 3-3-5 that Tressel's going to bring and Mitchell was going to have. But I feel like he is the guy. Like last year, Longo was kind of like the scapegoat, if you will. And I think this year, like, Tressel and Mitchell are going to be the scapegoats if stuff goes wrong. And I'm very concerned if he can really do it. And I hate to say that about it, but we just haven't seen it yet. And we're 3 years in.
I think it's fair. We've talked about that a bunch in the offseason. I continue to think he didn't have the horses, but you also should be better than 134th in the country in tackles for loss, which is what Justin has said. And the truth is somewhere in that middle ground, I think, right? Like, yeah, he didn't have as much talent as he has this year, but you can't be last in the country in tackles for loss at Wisconsin. I don't care who you have out there. You got to be better than that. So I think it's a good one. I want to throw a couple of these comments in here. This one is from the Discord. A2 Badger. I'm concerned we have a lot of specialists on defense. The other team can counter by playing with pace and not giving UW a chance to sub. I think he's talking about a guy like, let's say you're playing run defense. You have Perkins and Daryl Peterson and Aaron Witt out there. Those guys aren't necessarily your pass rush package. Or you go smaller with Cheeks, Clayton, Reiger, Fearby, Suggs. What are your thoughts? I actually think it paused me for a second. I think it's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question. And I think part of the thing that you mentioned about like you've seen them do all this rotation in practice, hopefully they're ready for that. Like they're practicing for these quick transitions. And I think you've got a lot of tweener guys that can kind of be both, like I think about Walker, obviously he's a really big guy. Reiger can probably do both. He can really set the edge and rush the passer. So I think it's definitely a concern. And I'm curious to see if teams actually do that against us, but I also feel like hopefully we're preparing. And, if we're going to have this many people, you've got to have quick sub packages. You've got to be able to make this happen quickly. You've got to be efficient. And I do think that they've got enough guys that can kind of do both, but we'll see.
And like I said, A2 Badger, thank you for the comment in the Discord. And like I said, I thought about this for a second. And the more I thought about it, Rajiv, the more I got less worried about it. Because I started thinking about other teams. And I'm like, there's not a lot of teams that have great dual purpose guys across the front line. Even you look at Alabama, they have 2 350-pounders in the middle of the line. Texas, the same way. They sub those guys out on pass rushing situations. Michigan did that last year with some of their big defensive linemen. And I was thinking, I don't think there's a ton of teams that have 4 great dudes up front that can equally play the run and play the pass. So I think a lot of teams are a little more situational. And to your point, I think there's guys on our team that are a little dual purpose. I think Walker can, Garner can. I think Suggs can do some of both. Reiger can, but you got to be careful not to wear Reiger out. I think that's a challenge. I actually think that's going to be one of the hidden challenges of this coaching staff is knowing, because I think he's the best player on defense. I'm just going to say that. And I think there's going to be a temptation to need him out there almost more than you want to have him out there based on his injury history. So Yeah, but on this one, I'm not that concerned because I just don't think that many teams have what this question would dictate.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Hopefully we're happy with what we get out of this.
Here was the take here from Herb Herman. Any questions about what you think the home crowd atmosphere might look like late season? Washington, Illinois. Let's say a couple of those games don't go the right way.
I'm glad this came up, and I did want to bring this up as like a bonus for me. An underrated storyline is the crowd and student section. I've talked about it a little bit. Like you've heard me talk about it quite a bit over the years. I just think that we've got to fix that. It's apparently going to get fixed this year better. And Camp Randall as an atmosphere has taken a hit. It's linear with production on the field you get crowd issues. Like that's sports. But I do think we need to be better. And I do think that, the students and the fans are going to see progress. And if that progress is actually there, I'm not saying we're going to have this great win-loss record because the schedule's brutal, but if the progress is there for getting better, I think that the atmosphere will be better late in the season. But if we have a shock loss to Maryland or something, and we're on track to win 4 games, it's going to be pretty rough. And honestly, I can't really blame people for that.
No, I think that's well said. I like this one here from Storm Shadow. Cornerback, you remember when we talked about all the people who left that corner and how frustrated we were? I actually kind of think the position's pretty good right now. Like, I actually think getting Rico back was a big deal. I think Agard's taken a step up. Gamir Latimer's been, and not just by me, by anybody who's watched practice, he's been pretty impressive. I like the young guys. This is a better position than I thought it would be when we were in the midst of losing all those dudes.
I'm glad to hear that you said the physicality is there. I'm glad that you saw that because that's going to be really important from not only our ability to interrupt wide receiver routes, things like that, but also from a run, stopping perspective and being able to make tackles. And that the more physical that group is, the better off the entire defensive unit is. So yeah, I'm excited to see that, and I hope it really is a strength for us.
I'm gonna end on this one from SGK25. You talked about it. You love the running backs, love Dupree. We both love Dylan. Is this the year one of those guys becomes kind of nationally recognized? First time since JT potentially at Wisconsin.
I'm going to officially say no, but it's not because of Dylan Jones. It's because I think that the line is going to have some problems. I hate to say it, but we talked about the depth. Like this concerns me. If Kevin Haywood was our starting left tackle right now, and we had a little bit more of a depth piece at the center, I would say yes to answer this question, but I have some concerns.
I'm also going to say no on this one for different reasons, although yours is very good as well. I think you just play a hellacious schedule. And I mean, it's just going to make it tough, right? There's going to be games where it's difficult. You talk about JT. JT didn't play these schedules. Now, JT would have been great against anybody, but you rack up number. How do you get nationally recognized? You get nationally recognized by racking up numbers. You rack up numbers against easier schedules. I think there's an element of it's just that simple. And they're also going to have a timeshare, right? You're going to have one guy with maybe 1,000 yards, maybe one guy with 600, maybe it's 800, 600, 400. I won't be that clean, but I think to your point, some offensive line questions. I think there's a timeshare, and I think the schedule is just tough. All of those are going to combine.
Yeah, and I know people. The schedule has been certainly a huge storyline in this offseason. But like I said, I interviewed these Maryland guys today, and I asked them what their floor and ceiling was, and all of them had a floor of 4 or higher. And I was like, "Are you nuts?" And I looked at their schedule, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I got it. If we played that schedule, I'd predict us with 9 or 10 wins. No kidding. Like, man, the disparity is brutal. And I know we're going to have our look next year to get an easy schedule, but man, like you look at Maryland's schedule and you will be shocked. Like it looks like Indiana's schedule from last year. It's just like, how are they not going to win 6 games?
It's just smart, Rajiv. You and I have talked about it. It's just the smart way to do it.
I'm more looking at Big Ten schedule, not that nonsense.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. We've gone long. I've taken 13 more minutes of Rajiv's time than I promised I would. So, Rajiv, thank you as always for jumping on the show, man. Really do appreciate you. Go check out what they're doing over at the Bucky Report. You know him, you know Justin. This has been Locked On. Thank you as always for tuning in. When you're done here, go check out the portal with Brian Smith doing all the recruiting, transfer portal stuff. He's doing an incredible job keeping up with that craziness. On Wisconsin, a bunch more content coming up as always, and we will definitely talk later.